Welcome to Human Skills Project, where I engage in deep conversation with my dearest friend, Ted Mouradian. If you don't know Ted, you will get to know Ted in a short second. If you haven't heard our previous episode of the conversation, that was the first episode where we are actually engaging in story format, um, like two friends conversing in the most respectful and secure manner. Um, and the trust that we have built over 10 years. Like I've met Ted when I first came to Canada 10 years
Has it been
ago.
that long?
So
Has it been that
yeah,
long? Wow.
exactly. I 10 years going, 9 years done, 10 years going. So I came in 2014. So 2014, 25th August. So it was just a couple of days ago that I started the 10th year. Um, So, where we started off our conversation is that we started in the last episode talking about how I met Ted and how we can engage in conversations. We can stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning and our conversation just seems naturally. Um, so, in this episode, we want to discuss. Ted introduced me to this book, and I'll always be grateful to Ted for this one, that The Most Dangerous Animal. And then after that, I had multiple conversations with David Livingston Smith, and I have them also in the YouTube form, where I discuss with um, David Livingston Smith, and his latest book, also I have interviewed him, is Monster, Making Monster, that how we humans can become so cruel. We will discuss about it. But before that, Ted, people who don't know you, are not familiar with your work, how would you introduce briefly who you are, about your work, and about your model? Three things.
Uh, just very briefly, I'm president of the 2% Factor, and you can check that out. I'm an author. I've written 4 books. I'm going to write another one this winter. And I was introduced many times as relationship management consultant. So basically, human skills is what I teach, and sort of tell people. I developed over 4 years at Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, a model called the Law of Cooperative Action. And that's basically how to live this journey and how to neutralize the 2%'s effect on us
Mhm.
on a regular basis, and how to navigate the stream or the river of life. How's that?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Um, so Ted has a lot of experiences managing people's organization. Ted gets hired by government bodies. Ted also worked at the United Nations, where Ted goes in an organization and sees what are the existing conflicts are there, why different groups cannot work together, and Ted trains them to develop human skills. So here, Ted trains, teaches, and strongly believes that this is a skill that can be developed. And by developing that skill, we can build a world that is more cooperative, more caring, more compassionate, where we're not at each other's throat. We're not hurting each other. So, in the last episode, we ended saying that humans, Ted was, what was we got at the point where you were asked by a friend. Uh,
Yes, well, during COVID, he said, now that we've sort of come together
mhm,
and we felt the same
mhm,
devastation in our lives,
mhm,
uh, are we going to be better people? And I said, no, the 2% will always be there.
mhm,
And even when I do my work in corporations,
mhm,
once I go in, I don't say, now it's fixed forever. You've had the magic pill. There will always be 2%. So the model is based on the fact is, how do I navigate this,
mhm,
knowing it's always going to be there? So the 2% will always be there. There'll always be the person who has low self-esteem, the person who is the bully, the person who wants to take over the world. And that's what frightens me about anything that's ever developed this. There's always that good part about it, and that one person that says, huh, remember the 2% concept is the type of person that will pick up a gun and shoot you no matter what the rules are. So there's always that mental mentality. And maybe you can speak to this, but this mental mentality comes, where we always have to have that one-upmanship,
mhm,
that, I'm better than you.
Hmm.
That type of mentality. I think it was Barnum and Bailey, one of the old music guys. You can't cheat an honest man,
Hmm.
and and the concept of people who do get sucked in or drink the Kool Aid, shall we say, um, are people who have very low self of who they are. So they follow and they become chameleons of that leader that they are. I mean, the
Hmm.
worst person is a born again of anything, a born again of anything. I remember when I divorced my wife and I came out as gay, I became gay because I'm now free, right? And so I had to go, oh, that's a little, that's not really who you are. It's just that you were in your cocoon for so
Hmm.
long. And
Hmm.
when you became this butterfly,
Hmm.
you really were a butterfly.
Hmm.
And I think everybody has to find their own level. And
Hmm.
that's why even when someone is really over the top wherever they are, I realize that's where they are in their place today. But I do think we have to realize that the 2% will always be there. We're
Right.
humanity's fallow. I mean, there's always going to be an earthquake. There's always going to be a thunderstorm. A tree is always going to get struck by lightning. It'll be there.
Right. So you argue, frightening argument, but also there are a lot of data, there are a lot of evidences to back it up. You have seen over and over again that the 2%, how you define people who are bully, who are destructive, who wants to devour everything, the greedy ones, um, rise to the power and runs the world. And that's the crazy thing because uh, Trump is actually not unique. You have Trumps around the world.
Nope, not at all. Not even close.
Yeah. And this is where I want to say that what Hitler did, or some dictator like, let's say, Bashar al-Assad, killing innocent people, um,
Well, I'm
or
of,
the,
I'm of Armenian descent, so the
yeah,
genocide in
yeah,
Armenia.
the Turkish genocide in Armenia, um, or Kim Jong Un, or the Trump, what have you, right? Um, I want to start at a very dark episode of human history when Eichmann, the guy who was also called the desk genocider, who
Doctor
ordered,
Doctor
yeah,
Death, yeah.
yeah. So Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi guy who signed all the gas chambering in places like Auschwitz and what have you, when he was being tried, that's when he was brought to the war trial in Jerusalem. A very prominent German American philosopher, writer, amazing thinker, Hannah Arendt, went to see the Eichmann trial. She has written an Eichmann trial, and this is what's going to be scary. And I'm telling you, when I read it, I was like, oh, Hannah Arendt sees Eichmann at the trial, and Hannah Arendt comes and says that, oh my God, he genuinely believes that he has not committed any crime, which you keep on saying all the time.
I've
You,
said that over and over again.
yeah. Can you explain that to me?
Well, again, when we go for the back to the unconscious incompetent from the last episode we did,
Mhm,
people's belief system
mhm,
to make themselves individual from everybody else and right, especially if you have a low self, you believe you're right. Because first, well, there's several aspects to that. And again, maybe you could speak to the psychology of it, but there's several aspects. We're either born to believe that. See, I don't think you're born racist, sexist, or homophobic.
mhm,
I believe that's taught. And our belief system of how we've been groomed as we grow up makes us the person we are today. I was a jock in high school and I was very patriarchal, and you wouldn't like me back then because, again, that's the way I was brought up. But I think what happens is we become that person, and then we think we're the only. That's right. That's right. We can't do it any other way. That's right. It happens more prominent in religion because someone interprets what God's will is and then projects that as that's being the only way, because we're so afraid religiously that unless we don't please God, there's not going to be a good afterlife. And so that's part of it. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but that's part of it. And the other is, today it becomes social media, avarice, greed. You see someone in a $20 million mansion and a house, and he said, I was nothing yesterday, and here's what I did. Oh, let me have some of that, right? Or you get the person who wants to do the control, so you vilify the other person. That they're going. There's a cartoon I saw once that's really good. It was a king and his advisor.
Mhm.
Down below there were people with pitchforks and people with torches.
Mhm.
And he says to the king, the advisor, "No, you don't have to call out the army. All we have to do is tell the people with the torches that the people with the pitchforks want to take their torches and stand back." That's what's happening today. And social media is making that worse, but that's what's exactly happening today. There's a white backlash, a white male backlash in the West, predominantly in the United States, and it's moving up to Canada, that the brown people, the black people, the yellow people are going to take their jobs and take their place as the top of the food chain, right? I mean, if you look at Judaism, for example, if you look at some of the passages in the Torah, in the Old Testament of the Bible, it's you marry your own tribe, you procreate, you multiply, and you're pure. I mean, that was Hitler's whole thing, the pure Aryan race. Not realizing, I think Aryans were were not white, and in the plateaus of northern India. So we want our race. They're taking your guns. The drag queens are grooming your children. So the best way to create conflict and to create that whole thing about um, dehumanizing the other is to say to someone, that person's going to take your life, take your job, take your whatever. And that creates the fear. And we also often say in seminars, the acronym for fear, FEAR, is fear is false evidence appearing real. And what I try to do all the time is try to find what the true evidence is. Because once you find the true evidence,
Mhm.
the fear goes away. That little spire is not going to kill me. The person who is different than me, eats different than me, prays different than me, is not going to take over my life. Someone in there may want to try to do that because of their insecurity or their low self-esteem about their belief system, that they will try to say, I'm wrong and take over my life. But the majority of the people, again, my 2% factor, 98% of people don't care what I wear, who I love, and what I eat.
Let me play devil's advocate here in defense of the white men in the North America. Um, and I'll give you some statistics, and you'll understand that where I'm coming from. Uh, there's a book. It's called "Dying of Whiteness," where a medical doctor goes and talks to the white men in the United States. Approximately 90% gun violence, where people who take their own life with the gun they own are white men.
Yep.
Um, so the author was interviewed by Bill Maher, and he was asked that why white men are doing it, like they're using their own gun to take their life. 3 out of 4 suicides are white men. So What we don't understand a lot of the times is white men are under severe mental health assault, like really serious mental health assault.
I had
Hmm.
a discussion with a feminist. I mean, this is 30 years ago or more.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she was saying, "You men."
Hmm.
And I said, "Stop.
Hmm.
Stop right there.
Hmm.
Did you not know that the patriarchy is more damaging to men than it is to women or any minority?
Hmm.
Because we men have to pretend to go up to that yardstick."
Hmm.
I wrote a paper once, "The Fear of the Feminization of the Male." If we look at what the problem is in the
Hmm.
world,
Hmm.
it is the concept of patriarchy,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
The fear that the concept is that we are superior.
Hmm.
So when you look at the suicide rate of white men,
Hmm.
a lot of it is because they can't or don't believe they can live up to
Hmm.
that standard. That's what
Right.
I said in the other episode. I wasn't allowed to or couldn't cry in public. I couldn't show that I was soft
Hmm.
or that I had vulnerability or
Hmm.
that I made mistakes,
Hmm.
um, or that I was self conscious about myself and who I am.
Hmm.
And that's the root. That's
Hmm.
also the root of the two percenter,
Right. Right.
because the
Um,
2% are the ones who can't live that way and must be in control.
right.
Bully.
Right. And this will sound like that I am probably being sympathetic towards this negative attitude. But I will go back to Spinoza's commitment, when Spinoza is swearing or taking a serious. Remember, Spinoza was a man who was excommunicated from his community at the age of 24, a young man, 24 years old. Yet Spinoza has been, and you know why? Spinoza was called by the Jewish community that he belonged to that he is non-believer. You know what's that? Atheist. He
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah, he was called as atheist, but philosophers called him God intoxicated. Imagine, Spinoza believed everything is connected to everything. What you're experiencing, that the universe is experiencing itself through you. You are not separate from the universe.
Exactly.
That's Spinoza's God, right? Spinoza saw God in everything. Spinoza was so dedicated to understand human emotions, human attitude. He literally brought Euclidean geometry to understand every emotion that we experience. There are underlying reasons behind it. And I, for one, somebody who grew up in abject poverty, abject destitution, um, particularly in my teenage years when I would not be able to sleep just because of hunger. I'm not glorifying poverty, but I tell you, my friend, those days were in immense way foundational to who I am today. That intimate understanding of human subjectivity, that intimate understanding of challenges and suffering, and it has inculcated a humility in me I don't think I'd be able to develop only by reading, only by going to university. No, it's lived experience.
And it's interesting too, because I came from a working class poor family. I
Yeah.
bought the first car for our family, and
Mm,
not to upstage you, but
mm,
because I can't experience, I mean,
mm,
can't believe living in a
mm,
house on a dirt floor with it. No, I
mm,
just can't
mm,
fathom that, right?
mm,
And there was a story of a guy who comes from a very poor country to the West for the first time, comes out of the bathroom
mm,
and is just beside himself. And the host says, "Well, what's wrong with you? You look
mm.
upset." And he said, "You people actually shit in your water." and and we can't comprehend that the water
That you
we
can
poop in,
drink.
that we water we poop in is gold in many countries, and even northern Canada to the
Mhm,
indigenous people, right? It's still under boil water. So the thing is that we when we believe that or come from where you came from. But
mhm,
question I have for you
mhm,
is, And we had 4 children in my family, and you
Mhm.
had what, 10 or
11.
11?
Mhm.
So what creates
Mhm.
a Feroz
Mhm.
as opposed to the other 10
Mhm.
who might, and I don't know your family, who might still be, and the
Mhm.
same with my family. What creates that one spark on someone who doesn't see themselves as a victim,
Mhm.
rises above? I mean, you've seen this, there's stories all over the place of the people who rise above, become great thinkers,
Mhm.
great contributors to society, and
Mhm.
the others who believe they're nothing but a victim of
Mhm.
society, a victim of where they were born.
Mhm.
Um,
I think this is pretty straightforward. I mean, I often give this example that the oldest scientific institution in the world, I mean, obviously there are, that is in existence. There are older scientific institutions that have, have been destroyed. Is British Royal Society. At the gate, you will see a Latin saying that nullius in verba, which means take no one word for it or examine everything,
yeah,
question everything. I think what was unique, although me and my 10 other siblings, like we grew up in the same household, because I was perpetually sick physically, I was not well, I would get easily beat up. So my refuge was reading.
yeah.
So what was my disadvantage became my advantage. So when I was reading, I first realized that it is okay to ask questions. I first realized people who died long time ago saying that your social circumstances, if you understand it, you can overcome it.
That's right.
So understanding was the key, right? Um, I remember when I was in 11th grade in Bangladesh. I didn't study in English medium or the British curriculum system. No, I was in high school and I read Albert Camus' The Outsider. So, and this is an easy book for me now, but I'm thinking about as a teenager at that time to be able to read that book. Uh, but what you just said, that anybody who is born again becomes that. I remember when I first read Marx, I became a Marxist. Even Marx was not a Marxist. I was a Marxist.
I remember some of our earlier conversations.
So I mean, Marx became my prophet. It was like, oh my God, I've been looking for you. Where have you been? Right? But only to realize later in my life, the subjective condition of my life made me so receptive to Marx,
Sure.
who put ointment in my wound, saying that I understand you. I understand that why you are suffering because you're working class.
So let's take that to our original question.
Yeah,
That circumstance, the
yeah,
way we were brought what is put in front of us,
hmm,
that's where the people will drink the Kool-Aid of
yeah,
something, whatever
hmm,
that is,
hmm.
to save them from their perceived or real
Hmm.
circumstance in life. How?
Okay, but sorry, Ted, I want to defend the white man first because that's why I think defending white man is important to
No, I
understand.
agree. I agree. No, I totally agree with you. I'm not saying you. I'm saying the person, whether the
Yeah,
white man, whoever it
yeah,
is.
hmm,
We're just talking about the human condition of all humans.
right.
And when I try to tell my white friends
Hmm,
about white privilege,
hmm,
they get really upset.
hmm,
And I'm not trying to say that we're above, but what I'm
hmm,
saying is no one follows us around a supermarket.
hmm,
No one is afraid when we walk
hmm,
into a room. That's
hmm,
white privilege. It has nothing to do with money.
hmm,
But I agree with you 100%.
hmm,
I think this next decade
hmm,
is going to really, really determine where we go in North America because the white man is so bruised,
hmm.
battered, and afraid. And I really mean afraid that they're going to lose their station in life.
Right.
So I'm not, yeah, we're on the same page with
So,
that.
so in terms of what is happening, particularly to the white men of the rural America, rural Canada, rural Europe. And I mean, I'm doing my PhD in rural studies, so I study a lot of rural thing. That basically, I come from a rural place, like in a very remote rural community, right? Agrarian community. Um, so, what is happening to the rural white men who are right now, and it has a lot of evidence to back it up, that they feel stranger in their own land.
That's right.
There's a book actually, it's on that, Hochschild from University of Berkeley, that stranger in their own land. So what is it? What does it mean to say the phrase "Make America Great Again"? What does it mean? I don't want to, and I go back to Spinoza, where I started saying that I admire Spinoza's commitment. Is that I promise? Spinoza said, "I promise to myself not to hate, not to dislike, not to but to understand."
That's part of my model. When someone is coming to me
Hmm.
and really visceral
Hmm.
in their view of the
Hmm.
world, themselves,
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
instead of going, "You're wrong, you're stupid."
Hmm.
I mean, sometimes it comes out because we're human, right?
Right, obviously.
Most of the time, I'm able to say, "Okay,
Hmm.
that's totally contrary to what I believe.
Hmm.
Help me understand why
Hmm.
you believe that."
Right, right,
Two
exactly.
two things happen there. We either,
Hmm.
if it's a two percenter, I'm not going
Hmm.
to get a conversation that's worth having. If it's a
Hmm.
98 percenter who is exhibiting 2% behavior, they're going to
Hmm.
go, "Well, I no, I think no. Help me. Tell me what got you to this place."
Hmm.
A lot of times, because of their self reflection at that point, and that's what I do
Hmm.
in workplaces too. Self
Hmm.
reflection at that point, they, oh yeah, now
Hmm.
I'm starting to understand why I hate that person.
Hmm. Yeah. And when we understand that why we hate somebody, I think not. I know that Carl Jung said that when somebody irritates you, something irritates you, some whatever it is a great source for your self understanding. Why does it irritate you? Right? It is not an easy path. It's a difficult one. That's why I forgot who said it. Somebody said that most people judge because thinking is difficult. Judging is easy. It's like it's automatic, right?
Eh,
So, mhm.
Yeah, and I also think too, if
Mhm.
we're always use the word tolerate
Mhm.
and judgment and that, um, I always say in my model, there's a point in tenet number 6. Acceptance is not necessarily agreement. I think one of the things we have to realize
Mhm.
is that for me to accept
Mhm.
you in your wholeness,
Mhm.
whether I believe it entirely or I think you're the worst idiot in the world,
Mhm.
I have to accept the
Mhm.
fact that you are you. I don't have to
Mhm.
agree with it. I don't have to condone it. I don't have to even be in the same room with it.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, but by saying something like everybody uses this when we get into an argument or a conflict, well, we're going to agree to disagree. That's not a good thing because I still believe you're wrong.
Mhm.
Trump believes he's right. Bin Laden believed he's right.
Mhm.
I have to accept that. Do I agree with it? No.
Now, if there's one tenet from your model that I use ever since I've learned it every day, and I try to, and you understand one of the reasons is the place where I was born. When I go back, I realize that people of my community finds me strange. And I try to explain it this way that, you are what you know. And what you know changes. For some people, it doesn't. So what you know change when what you know changes, you change. And when you change, people who love you, they don't want to see their loved ones change because to them, when they change, that person dies. That person does not fit into their model anymore.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I've often said sometimes the world's a tuxedo and we're a pair of brown shoes, the ones who
Mm.
don't think they fit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's I've had that happen. Since I went from that jock Ted
Mm,
to that married Ted to
mm,
that gay Ted to that
mhm,
academic Ted, because I
mhm,
went to university in my mid 40s.
mm,
I've changed. And I believe for the good. Some of people around me, I've
Hmm.
lost friends. I've gained a bunch of new friends.
Hmm.
But life is that fluid, and it's really difficult for us. Change is horrible. People don't like change.
Hmm.
They don't like it at all. And
Hmm.
so to learn to accept the fact that this stream keeps going, it's
Hmm.
constantly changing,
Hmm.
and that we are in control of how we act and react to that change.
Hmm.
I don't feel 75. I still walk golf clubbing,
Hmm.
and I work out. When I look in the mirror, sometimes I said, "Man, you're 75," but
Hmm.
mentally, I
Hmm.
would rather hang around. By the way, I would rather hang around with younger people, like you're 40, hang
Hmm.
around with younger people than I will people my age, because all we talk about is our age, our
Hmm.
prostate, and our illness. And to
Hmm.
me, that's not good, because that
Hmm.
puts you in a mindset that doesn't get you. And then also, as we talked about earlier, the other who are trying to take over our lives. I don't understand kids today. I don't understand the world today. Well,
Hmm.
why not go and ask? Why not go and research? There's another thing I use is education rather than segregation.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
read the Quran a few years ago because I wanted to understand, right? And yet we don't. Oh, those people are wrong,
Hmm.
but they're not. In their mind, they're right. And that's
Yeah.
what we have to accept.
So that brings to the core of your model some of the, I think, and obviously academia is one of the worst places for it, um, to say things in a plain and simple language, um, either because of academic requirement or out of insecurity. We say things in a very complex language, convoluted language. It doesn't really help. So what I'm learning a lot from indigenous academic professors saying that, Feroz, write in simple language, write in simple language. One of the other things, because my previous training was in sociology, sociologists are one of the precious uh, departments in the world where writing in simple language is probably considered to be, that down under. Like you're a sociologist too. You graduate from sociology. You know that. You know how it is. I mean, you write in simple language like you don't know anything.
I've argued with some professors, and they, oh, well, we got to dumb it down. I said, no, it's not dumbing it down. You're complaining that no one's reading your work
Hmm.
because you're talking to academics instead of talking to the real world, the everyday person. When I
Right.
first developed the model with the
Hmm.
professor I was working with,
Hmm.
she said, well, you got to create something that is yours,
Hmm.
a phrase, a terminology. Originally, it was the Mouradian model for homeosynergistic relationship. And
Hmm.
if you were not within the model, you were anti-synergistic. If you didn't know, you were non-synergistic. We had units and all. And I was trying to go out to business world and to share this with people. And so now it's the law of cooperative action, the cooperative action model, because that's what it was about, not
Hmm.
this homeosynergistic word.
Hmm.
And people understand it's cooperative action.
Yeah. I mean,
World,
I do value complex language at times. Let's say when in philosophy, when you have, I don't think philosophy tries to understand what hasn't been understood at all.
yeah.
So anything that we cannot connect with our experiences appear to be difficult,
And
right?
the business world is awful for nomenclature and terminology.
Right, right.
And there are some words that, like paradigm, when the paradigm came out, we've got to shift our paradigm. Oh, stop saying the word paradigm,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because when a word is overused, it loses its meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like for instance, um, the word love, the meaning of it, like, so I said this way, and I'm going to borrow it from Eric Fromm. Um, Fromm argues love has two sections. One is understanding it, the other one is practicing it. Eric Fromm argues in his book, The Art of Loving, that everybody complains about love. But basically, what they're complaining about not receiving love.
I say there are three
Hmm.
loves. One is being loved,
Hmm. You're
one is
receiving
being,
it.
one is being in love,
Mm-hmm.
and one is being love,
Mm-hmm.
the presence of being love.
Mm-hmm.
If you are love, if you
Mm-hmm.
come from that place of being love,
Mm-hmm.
you don't desire or need to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
and you are in love with just being.
Mm-hmm.
So that conflict
Mm-hmm.
that we're going, but well, I'm not loved enough. You don't love me enough. You
Mm-hmm.
know, oh geez, I wish he would love me or she would love me. That goes away because if you are love,
Mm-hmm.
then when we talked earlier in the other episode, your red
Mm-hmm.
shines brightly and you accept the other person's yellow. So the
Yeah.
orange is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, when you say loved, in love, or being love, they're very three different things. One thing is we can talk about falling in love,
Yep.
and the other one is standing in love. What does it mean? Falling in love is can be explained using biological sciences, that there's this attraction which is biological, which is, you know um, Richard Dawkins says in his book, a selfish gene. The gene is just trying to procreate. That's it. There are trillions and trillions of genes inside you trying to find out, okay, how do you continue the journey of gene? That's it.
That's right.
But there's the other one is, okay, you meet somebody, and to be with anybody is difficult. Like, if I think that I am easy to be around, means I have very inadequate self-awareness. Is that having the knowledge that how difficult it is for anybody to be with me, to be around me. And that comes from self-understanding. But when I have poor self-understanding, I need to depend on your attention. I need to depend on your doting. So I become that perpetual needy child who cannot do without the attention of her parents.
That's right.
Is that sustainable?
Not
No.
necessarily. The
No.
same as dominant love, where I have to control you
Hmm.
and control your love for me.
Hmm.
There's no
But,
love there.
so what is dominant love then? Where does it come from?
And again, I think that's probably more. Well, there's two. I won't say it's patriarchal, but male to female,
Hmm.
it's patriarchal. Female to child,
Hmm.
there's a dominant love there too.
Hmm.
I'm your mother. You need to respect me. You
Hmm.
know, I love you unconditionally. Well, not necessarily, because you're not going to be what I want you to be.
Hmm.
It's funny when we talk about love and parents or anybody. I use another analogy about a photo album. So we're all born, and
Hmm.
we have a photo album of where we think our life is going to go.
Hmm.
When a parent's child is born, the parent automatically creates that photo album of that child's entire life based on the parent's perception of where that life is supposed to go. But the child has their own photo album that creates about this is where I want to go in my life. Example, child comes in one day and brings their partner in and says, "Hi, mom and dad, look what I fell in love with." And the mom and dad look at, that's not in our photo album. That's not in our photo album, right?
Hmm.
So what we have to learn is how to take our photo album of our life,
Hmm.
our parents' photo album, and how to marry them together.
Hmm.
And again, that's celebrating the other person's tenant number one, right to be who they want to be no matter what. And
Hmm.
once you find two individuals or 10 or 20 dozen who have that same concept of cooperative action, it works.
Hmm.
You and I, as what you said at the beginning, we come from very different places, very different worlds, but
Hmm.
because we respect each other's color, we
Hmm.
respect each other's way of being,
Hmm.
we can cohabitate in cooperative action in the most amazing way. Even if we may disagree
Hmm.
on an aspect of life,
Hmm.
which is funny, you'll notice this. because we've totally 100% accepted each other for who we are, there is little or no disagreement. There's only discussion and a quest for knowledge.
Right. I think I have operationalized it, has made it my everyday toolkit ever since I learned it from you, is that um, I don't agree with you, but I accept you.
That's right.
Acceptance is not agreement. So, what I just said moments ago, that when I go to my village or where I come from, a lot of people find it difficult to accept me.
That's right.
And I
Because
tell them that you don't have to agree with me, but accept me for who I am. We cannot be in a relationship if you cannot accept me for who I am, and that is from your model.
that's right.
That
And
Mhm, go
the old way of teaching MBA students
on.
and a lot of psychology in the past is learning what the other person wants, their culture. I heard this last week. We teach cultural awareness
Mhm,
so that you don't make a mistake when you
mhm,
go into somebody else's culture.
mhm,
The problem with that is I think we take it too far, like Myers Briggs, True
mhm,
Colors. We learn the other person's
mhm,
personality. In
mhm,
my model, I don't care. As long as I'm doing the model right, by celebrating you, by not wanting to harm you, by speaking respectfully to you, by coming from a place of if I can, I will, and let it go. If I make a mistake and you're a true person who wants to understand, you'll accept my mistake. I will apologize for it. We'll move on. If I continue to make the mistake or continue to abuse you according to what
mhm,
you think is wrong, then we
mhm.
won't move on,
Right, right.
right?
I want to add to that in terms of measuring people. And I think this is why your example of stream is so potent. Such a powerful analogy. A river, it's Heraclitus, right? That you can never step in the same river twice.
Never.
You never step. So when I measure you through this or that psychological test, I box you. Oh, Ted is in box one. And then what happens? Immediately, I stop seeing Ted. What I fail to understand that Ted is also part of the stream of life that is forever changing. If I see you tomorrow, and when I'm saying this, I'm saying this from the teachings of Eastern philosophy, particularly Krishnamurti, a very prominent and very challenging thinker. Most people can deal with him. I remember when I first read Murti in 2010, I was reading a book. I literally physically threw the book. It was like garbage. Because what happened, it challenged my identity to the very core existence of who I am. And I went into an existential angst, an existential crisis, and the immediate response was throwing the book. But because my ego got stuck with what he was saying, I think he died in 80s. Yeah, he did like long before then. Yeah. But then I kept going because the more I disagreed with him, the more I wanted to understand him. And I found out is that my journey of wanting to understand people that I disagree helped me to accept them, not agree with them.
That's right.
And I think if you can write the future version of the model, it's a living model. It is not a static, set in stone something.
That's why I don't and never have taken or agreed with. I've studied it. The models like Myers Briggs are like when someone says, "Oh, you're an extrovert" or "You're an introvert."
Hmm.
I don't believe that 100%. I
Yeah.
believe that in certain circumstances you are.
Mhm.
Um, I'm a very multifaceted person. And when I had one young person they had to find a famous person, and I don't know why she picked me,
Mhm.
but she had to do a sort of a biography a little bit, and she entitled it "The Renaissance Man."
Mhm.
And I had to look that up at that time.
Mhm.
And so, because I can appreciate opera, but I can go for a beer, I can street fight, I play sports, I could build a house, I
Mhm.
paint, I do rock balancing, I do artwork. So I'm this, I guess, all round,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I think most of us are, if
Mhm.
we allowed ourselves to be that. Only
Mhm.
society has said, nope, you're the man of the house,
Mhm.
you're the woman of the house. Oh
Mhm.
no, you've got a handicap. Even handicap. We look at somebody with one arm, we say, oh, that poor guy's handicapped. No, they aren't. They were born that way, and they can do more things with one arm than we can do with three.
Mhm.
But our perception, as you were saying, we throw that out and saying, oh, that person is that, instead of saying, no, maybe that person's more than that,
Right.
or less than that.
Right. Right. And speaking of handicap, just think about it. The person who is blind can think more clearly than you and I,
Right?
because for us, a lot of things that is going through our eyes are messing with our thinking process, right? So I would want to communicate to our audience, or for me myself, uh, that your model is a living model. It's not static.
That's right.
And humans are this episode that we started talking about, that how humans are the most dangerous animal. When you introduced to this book, to me, David Livingston Smith, who is a philosopher in training, who has been studying for so long about understanding how humans become so unimaginably cruel. What David would argue, that it is by understanding that how we can become so cruel, by understanding our ability to become cruel, gives us the opportunity to become compassionate.
Exactly. First thing we think about, and I don't know how many times people have said this to me
Mhm.
because of the counseling I do, because I get people who call me up and regular, Ted, have you got a minute? Can we have a coffee?
Mhm.
And of course, and the basis of, so what's going on, George or Martha? Well, you can't believe what X did to me. Hear what I just said? What X did to me. We're so hung up that the other person has gone out of their way to do that to them.
Mhm.
They don't, they just do it. The person who cut you off in traffic didn't see you, they did it. The bigot is not doing it to you, they're just doing it because that's who they are. If you take nature, the flower grows, might push a weed out, didn't do it to the weed, the flower just grew. If you look at animals who feed from other animals, and those who have sacrificed so that they can feed, that's part of the cooperative action network that I talk about. They didn't do it to that, they did it. Now, that's hard to live with when you think, Trump is not doing it to somebody. Bin Laden didn't do it. Bin Laden just did it. You happen to be in the way. One doctor said to me one time, because I asked him about an illness I had, and I said, like, why did this happen to me? I'm fairly healthy. He said, it's the luck of the draw. And I thought, and I think, the luck of the draw. Yeah. The squirrel got hit by a car. All the squirrel family does go, hey, I wonder what happened to George today. George, poor George, he shouldn't have walked out there. No, the squirrel got hit by a car. Move on. Let's go get some nuts. We Animal kingdom, tree doesn't look at another tree and say, oh, lightning struck you. Now, why would you even have stood there and let the lightning strike you? I don't, you know where I'm going with this? It's, I turn around and I just said, it did it.
Okay, so let me give you some backup to that.
Okay.
The difference between animals and us. Plato wanted to understand time. What is past? What is present? And what is future? Plato put it this way: is that What we say past doesn't exist because it once was, but it is no more.
Like the stream.
Yeah. What is future will happen at some time, but hasn't happened yet. But yet, our present is either stuck with our past, regrets, or the anxiety of the future. So, present is all the moment that you have. That is
Right.
it.
Well, Eckhart Tolle's book, Power of Now, right?
Yeah.
Live in the moment.
Right.
There's another term I think is mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Yeah.
Yeah, like really savor that bite of food.
Right. So, what is different about humans in comparison to other animals? And what makes humans so dangerous? So dangerous. Humans, in our last episode, we talked about it. And this episode, you were talking about, okay, you believe certain things because where you were born, things that were, okay. So humans are not, you are saying that humans are not biologically racist. Humans are not biologically, but some thinkers, some scientists will argue otherwise, and I'll tell you how. Think about humans. Humans do not have the fangs of a snake, wings of an eagle, or the speed of a cheetah. We don't. We are this featherless, fangless, clawless, recently evolved higher primate. The only thing that is different about humans in comparison to other species is that in comparison to our body side, we have this enormous brain, and it can be studied, and it's everywhere, it's replicated, it's the same.
Right.
Our brain prefrontal cortex is only 70,000 years old. 70,000 years ago, because of an unexplainable mutation, we developed prefrontal cortex, this such huge brain, right? Okay, what does it do? Human brain is tasked with only one thing: survival.
Yep.
That is it. That is it. And in the last episode, we talked about a difference between indigenous ways of knowing the world and European ways of knowing the world. The European ways of knowing the world comes from a place of hubris that, oh, we can look at the world objectively, we see the reality. But then neuroscientists like Donald Hoffman will tell you in the book, Against Reality, will tell you, well, bees can see colors that you and I cannot see. Dogs can hear sound that you and I cannot hear. Just because we cannot see something or cannot hear something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Human perception evolved to keep humans alive. That is it. By seeing the reality, what it is not in favor of human perception. It is not in favor of human survival. So we came up with all kinds of mythology, evolutionary mythology, that my myth is better than your myth. Why? Because myth gives us the strength to survive in the midst of enormous universal uncertainty. Human brain doesn't function well in the midst of uncertainty.
That's right. So what you're saying is that
Mm, mm,
because I believe this,
mhm,
that gives me a satisfaction that I
mhm,
know
mhm.
that I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm okay, exactly. So what happens, you feed your brain with a mythology that it's going to be okay, after you die, da 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 da, etc. So it's a mythology. Now I am in the comfort of that, mythology, that story, right? Now you come along and you say, well, I'm an evolutionary biologist. Humans are not that special. It just recently evolved monkey. This is how it is. What are you doing? You
Destroying.
are destroying my myth.
That's right.
You are destroying my story. Immediately, you are taking the ground beneath my feet.
Right.
If you do not have the appetite to understand or to quest for the truth, immediately you go in a survival mode, existential angst. And what I said at the beginning of this episode, let me defend the rural men and women, right? So what's happening? For the rural white man, there was a time in the history of humanity that was great for them, when you had slaves, when, you know, you had decimated the indigenous community. 98% indigenous people have been murdered. 98%. Man, where I come from, it was also a British colony for 200 years. The Brits came, ruled us for 200 years, and they left.
Yep.
But think about the indigenous people. They have been killed. 98%. To overcome that loss, it's not easy.
No.
It is not easy. You see what I mean? So, what's happening? These men and women who were once reaping the benefit of a myth that white men are superior has collapsed because of enormous technological progress. The brown man from India comes here now, becomes the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, because his value comes from his technical skill. He understands how computer works. So what happens? You take away that white man's ways of living. The economy has changed, technology has changed. His identity is threatened. Now, somebody comes along and says, like somebody like Trump, and says, it's the fault of that brown man. It's the fault of that yellow man. It's the fault of that Chinese man. It's a kung flu virus. He says that, right?
I know.
What are
Yeah.
you doing? You are giving voice to the pain, to the suffering of the millions of people who have been marginalized. In other words, the black man or woman were once at the end of the whiplash. They are the one who suffered the stung of the whip. But now, when the same economic whip falls on your back, you can't deal with. You can't
Oh,
deal
no.
with it, right? So what happens? You see, as we started by this episode by saying that 3 out of 4 suicide are men, white men. They can't handle it. So Sinead O'Connor,
She
Irish
attacked
musician,
that.
yeah, Sinead O'Connor has a famous song. Is that Ireland needs to remember. It is only by remembering you'll heal, that it was the Brits who did that thing to the Irish, not to stay angry, not to stay. So I'm not saying that by hating the white man solves the problem. It doesn't. It is by understanding that the white man and the non white man, their reality of relationality. If the planet dies, you die, so with it. Me, I don't stay alive. It's by knowing that you are my brother, you are my relation. It's knowing that we are in this love relation together, or else we're gonna die together. Like you can't escape it. You can't escape it. Where are you gonna go? It just we just have this one planet.
I know, and that's again that in my teachings, the whole thing is based on me, not you. So the
Mm.
whole model is based on how I act and react to what the planet does to me.
Yeah.
And what you mentioned about the angst of the white man, and that
Mhm.
goes back to what I said earlier.
Mhm.
The Trumps of the world are
Mhm.
just saying that the guys with the pitchforks are going to take your
Mhm.
torches,
Yeah.
and and so it creates the fear, false
Yeah.
evidence appearing real, and then we start getting angry and we start lashing out. And as long as you get the 2%ers who control some of the 98%
Mhm.
in their thinking,
Mhm.
is you get them to hold a rifle or a
Mhm.
gun to create
Mhm.
the other as being non-human.
Mhm.
So if remember in the Second World War, cockroaches they called the Jews.
Right.
It's like if you can make them non-human. It
Mhm.
bothers me right now what's happening, and I know I'm going off, but what's happening in Africa when you get two black same color fighting each other over some guy with a gun who says nope, they're out to get you. I hope our discussions can help people realize
Mhm.
that no one's out to get you but you.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
a way, it's there. If we all stood back, like I don't know if you ever heard the Tommy Douglas's story about the Mouse City or not.
No.
Well, this is interesting. Tommy Douglas in Canada was the father of universal health care.
Mhm.
He was NDP,
Mhm.
and he had this story about the mice were sitting around one day,
Mhm.
and they said, one's talking to the other, like you and I are, and say, it's interesting. we elect the white cat.
Mhm.
We get mad at what the white cat's doing. So what do? We elect the black cat.
Mhm.
And we don't like what the black cat's doing, and we elect another white cat. And
Mhm.
we keep going back and forth. When are we ever going to elect a mouse?
Mhm.
And I guess in that story, when you look at the numbers of the humans,
Mhm.
we outnumber the Trumps and the Kim Jong Uns and all of these people. But yet that would be a good discussion. Why do we sit back and not take over? Why is it one person with a gun can keep 1,000 people at bay?
Right. I can. That question was answered in 1972. Why? It explained. Right. What is it? Would you agree that right now, from your model 2% factor, I can give you enough evidence that it is the 2% factor. It is the 2% who are the presidents of the corporations, owners of the bank,
Mm-hmm.
the military general with the deadliest weapon at their disposal. It is that belongs to the 2%. Brian Klaas, a professor, has written a book. It's called Corruptible, where he argues with a lot of evidence that the economic political system is as such, the corporate system is as such, it is the psychopath, it is that sociopath who don't really feel, who don't have compassion, who don't look at the world relationally. It's that Wendigo from that um, creation story myth from the indigenous like story. So Wendigo myth is this, that Wendigo is that monster that is perpetually hungry. The more it feeds itself, it becomes even hungrier.
Well, like it's a cancer because cancer is hungry. It
Yeah.
kills its host.
Right, right,
So therefore it
exactly.
dies. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's different about Wendigo is that Wendigo is not born, it's made. Wendigo is in all of us.
Yeah.
So what's a boogeyman story in indigenous mythology has a powerful story to tell that what we're doing to each other. Every 4 seconds, Ted, every 4 seconds, somebody's dying on this planet because there is one Trump, there's one Bashar al-Assad, there's one Putin, there's one I don't know, just enough Modi, you name it, right?
Call it a bully. Call it a bully. The
Yeah,
leader of the gang, whatever it
yeah,
is. Right.
yeah. You name it, right? So Brian Klaas argues the system is as such that it rewards the 2%, the bully who makes noise, right? So how was it answered in 1972? Because Brian Klaas's book came out in 2019 or 20. It's like very recent. So what do you call stream of life or interconnected system? A group of researchers from MIT, they said it systems, that how everything is connected to everything. And then they also came up with a term it's called leverage point.
Okay.
There are some points that if you bring in a small change, it's going to result in a huge outcome. What you just tell me the story of Tummy Dog is a story of mental model. At one point, the mice started understanding that if we do not change our ways of thinking, we will not be able to provide our healthcare.
That's right.
Right? So we are the victim of the mental model that we operate. But what is interesting about mental model is that mental model operates within us, but it stays unconscious. It requires the confident, compassionate, caring companions in our life who we can talk to without any fear or inhibition. That saying, because I can be your mirror. For you to be your holistic mirror is very difficult, Ted. You can be your mirror to some extent, but not 100%,
That's right.
right? So, in your model, when you talk about the law of cooperative action, when you talk about the stream of life, how do you think that we can begin to unearth what is the mental model that is operating beneath us?
Um, I think that there's a at least I try. There's a awareness of a sense of self in
Hmm.
yourself.
Hmm.
but also putting the ratio of the 2%, 98% into effect.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever I'm starting to feel angst about something,
Mm-hmm.
um, even if I do a speech and someone says to me, well, that didn't hit well with such and such and such and such. And then I sit back and I think, was that systemic? Am I saying something that is systemic, that's part of, or was that a 2% incident? And I do that in my corporations. What I
Mm-hmm.
say to people in corporations, if something hits you, right, that's
Mm-hmm.
the, the 2%, because 2% is not just a person, it's
Mm-hmm.
also an action. If
Mm-hmm.
you get a flat tire, you've had a 98% of a good day, you get a flat tire, 2%, it becomes your day.
Mm-hmm.
So in order not to go down that rabbit hole,
Mm-hmm.
I look and I sit back myself and I say, okay, is that systemic? Do I need to change something in what I'm doing or maybe, or is that a 2% factor
Mm-hmm.
or 2% incident? So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, shove it off and go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we can have people understand that ratio,
Mm-hmm.
then they don't have to always vote for one of the two cats.
Mm-hmm.
They can start saying, well, you know what? It's going to be okay if I vote for a mouse.
So can you focus on the sense of self again? That sense of self. Like how do we begin to understand what is that sense of self that is operating within me?
Well, I understand and know that nobody can hurt Ted but Ted. And we've taken nowadays, oh, it makes me sick. I'm offended, victim status, so I'm a victim of. And I'm sorry, this may sound very insensitive, but victim status is chosen. Unless someone blows me up or shoots me or beats me up, victim status is chosen. Now that's going to be really hard for a lot of people to swallow. Okay? But the minute we realize that we aren't victims, we are simply targets. It's all we are targets. We're a target of bullying. We're a target of harassment. We're a target, a target of cancer, a target, oh, I was a victim of cancer. No, you weren't. You were a target of cancer. You chose to be the victim, and that becomes your raison d'etre, becoming or as a victim of cancer, rather than saying, know what? I was a target of cancer. They took it out. I still have some residuals from that, but I'm moving forward. To realize that we are never, ever not victims except in our own minds, that raises us up to say, I can be the Ted that I was created to be. I can be the Ted that can think independently of the hordes or the system, as you've been putting it. I can be the Ted to think. Now, do I need to be part of the system? Law of cooperative action, yes. Do I need to adhere to systems sometimes that maybe I don't really want to? Yes. Tenet 4, come from a place of if I can, I will, but I won't lose my sense of self. So when you put all of those 6 tenets into place, do I like the system sometimes? No. Tenet 1, I celebrate the individual. So there are systems or people who do what they do, but I have to accept them. So once I do that, then I realize that the only people or actions or events that create conflict in my life, those are only conflicts if I allow them to be conflicts. I'm in 100% control without being controlling. So I will not allow it to be a conflict. I will not allow it to be part of who I am and who my life is.
Okay, so when you were saying, and this is the tricky, and this is why I think what appears to be simple to you probably is not simple to most people.
No, it's actually, Feroz,
Mm,
it's so simple, it's
mm,
complicated,
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
that makes sense to you.
I say it this way: is that simple is not easy.
No, it isn't. No.
Simple is not easy. I mean, I when you say that, and see, I am 41. I think now I'm comfortable in my skin. Now,
As Kermit the Frog says, it's not easy being green, right? In that one
right,
song he sings.
right, right. So when I see my 17-year-old son, I feel like, oh my God, he is going through probably one of the most insecure episode of his life, because every time his sense of self is telling him it's him versus the rest of the world. Everybody is doing something to hurt him, to belittle him, right? Now, this is where I think I am comfortable in my skin by recognizing my vulnerability, by recognizing that I don't have to carry around this 200-pound, armor to appear, you know, invincible, undefeatable, which most men do. So going back to the question of this episode, that what makes human beings so dangerous, which is argued and explained very beautiful in this book that you have introduced me to, David argues and explains with a lot of evidence that humans' development of this prefrontal cortex made them tribal, because you don't have the fangs of a cobra or the wings of an eagle. To survive, you have to depend on
You have
others.
to be the, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the very fundamental tribal mentality is in group and out group mentality. So we are biologically prone to be tribal.
Of
It is
course.
in the evolutionary journey. The moment I become tribal, it's like this, that I don't like white people except Ted because I know Ted. If I would know other white people, if I would become, I have a lot of white friends. So you will think, oh, I'm not saying you do it, but I'm saying that Ted would say that, oh, brown people are idiots except Firoz because I know Firoz.
Well, it's what I said earlier, education rather than segregation.
Right, right.
No, yeah,
So by exposing that, coming in contact and getting into dialogue, not debate, because in debate we are motivated by the agenda of winning.
that's right.
I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm saying, oh, this is what Ted is saying. I want to understand, what can I say to come in defense argument.
We're listen nowadays. I think we're listening to answer back, not listening to learn. And I
Yeah,
would love people to twist that around and start listening to learn
yeah.
instead of listening with judgment in mind.
Right, right. And also listening to learn is such a rewarding process, is because, like, let's say when somebody's coming and telling me that, the earth is not, and this is what my research, right? So when somebody tells me that, the earth is not actually round, it's actually flat. The NASA has always lied to you and all of that. And in my research, I find out, okay, fine. So why do you believe it? Why do you, what evidence do you have? Like, can you give me some reasons? And then it unfolds the most fantastic of story for you to feel in that person's skin that why they believe that earth is flat. And 9 out of 10 times, almost like with an exception, you will find out that something has terribly gone in their life.
That's right.
They've lost their job, lost their loved ones, struggling with loneliness, struggling with social isolation. So he's right when he says the earth is flat, because he is experiencing the earth as flat.
So I said everybody believes. That's why when you said the word mistake,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever made a mistake in my entire life. Have I done stupid things? Have I would I prefer to have gone another direction? But at the time I made that decision to do whatever it was I was going to do, I honestly, in the deepest recess of my soul, believed I was right.
Right, exactly. So a lot of the times academics get the bad rep, like, oh, you theorize, you theorize. You are a living theory. Everything that you do it from the theory that you hold within you.
That's
It's
right.
just that in academia, you consciously make a process to understand what is the theory in you that is operating to guide all of your actions, all of your actions. If you say that you are not theoretical, nobody can be untheoretical. Everybody is theoretical. Everybody, right? So the everyday lingo, we say belief. What do you believe, right? So belief evolved, whether it's mythology, whether it is becoming a part of the member of the tribe, or part of a nation, or whatever, what have you. These constructions were enormously necessary for us in the evolving time. But what has happened, that this system that have evolved has become too complex, that our brain has biological limit. Our body tires. So when you're on social media, when you were evolving in the plains of savannah, your tribe was 40 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200, and they all had similar color, similar physical attributes. What is the physical attribute of a person that appears in front of us first? The longest organ in your body is your skin. The
The biggest organ, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So your skin color appears first. So in my passive emotion, I go into that tribal mindset. Oh, here's a brown brother. But then Zora Neale Hurston will tell you that skin folk is not kinfolk, a black author.
That's right.
How many people you have seen in Canada who have come from different countries? I know a lot of brown people that I come from. Is that, oh, I came from Bangladesh. Oh, I arrived here. I got a Canadian passport. That's great. But I don't want anybody else to come here. Haven't you seen?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things that I've talked about in the past
Yeah.
is it amazes me as human beings. Once we get a seat at the table, we fight for that seat at that table.
Mm-hmm.
And then we turn around, we won't let anybody else get the seat beside us.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I know actively people mislead you towards getting a certain goal because they have gotten that goal. I have become a doctor. I will mislead you so that you don't become a doctor, because you becoming a doctor makes me less. And that is coming from a lesser self within us.
Right.
So in becoming a devil's advocate, I'll tell you, the 2% factor people, they suffer enormously in their soul, in their spirit.
Oh, they're shells. They're easiest. And the funny part is,
Mhm.
with the proper human skills, and that's why I do my work,
Mhm.
you can neutralize the 2%
Mhm.
easily.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm sure a lot of our viewers will know the Wizard of Oz.
Mhm. Yeah.
What happens in the Wizard of Oz is when the lion jumps out, scares the scarecrow,
Mhm.
scares the Tin Man, jumps in front of Dorothy, goes after Dorothy. What does Dorothy do? Dorothy slaps him on the nose, and he goes. "Ugh." In my work, we go in, and all you got to do is stand up to the 2%er and say, "Stop." They've never had somebody tell them that before. Trump right now, we mentioned him a couple of times. I don't like to
Mhm.
mention, but right now, he's a frightened, angry little boy.
Right.
And people, at night, he's
Mhm.
not sleeping. I will guarantee it. He is sweating because he has a real possibility of going to jail, which he
He was
never,
mugshotted, right? He had to take a mugshot. The first U.S. president to take a mugshot.
yeah,
Yeah.
but he never ever in his life thought he'd be in this position. So he can't understand it. For example, he honestly can't understand how he lost the election because people love me. Look at all the people who come out. Look at the look. He can't understand it. Bullies are the most fragile people in the world. If you can get to a certain point with a bully, you'll dismantle them. And if everybody, it's like there's an old story. I don't know if you were brought up in Bangladesh with it, but the emperor with no clothes, the emperor has no clothes, is a story. So again, that's a bully. That is the 2%. They have no clothes. And if we just realize and point it to everybody around them and says, you know what? He has no clothes. And it took a little boy to say, he has no clothes.
Right. Right.
You know,
Exactly. So from that vantage point, we will continue our conversation. Um, I want to conclude by saying that what makes human beings most dangerous animal, it comes from a place of fragility. It
Yep.
comes from a place of vulnerability. It comes from a place that we are helpless in the faces of this greatest forces.
Yep.
Um, and our recently evolved brain, the universe is 13.5 billion years old. The earth itself evolved for 4.5 billion years old.
Oh, don't tell the Christians that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I can appreciate that why it is appealing to believe that the earth was created in 6 days, or any number of mythological creation story that comes from a place of vulnerability. Or I can appreciate um, people who probably don't have the money and resources to go to see a therapist, or probably not fortunate like me to have a friend like you to have this deepest conversation. If they find a solace and peace, on their in the church, lighting a candle, and who has lost her son, to talk to God, I mean, I would really feel bad about myself if I go and like tell them, what are you worshiping, right?
Yeah. Oh no, to them that's right and that's real for them.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right and
So,
that's real.
right,
I'm not talking about talking people out of their belief system or
right,
their
right,
religion.
right. Yeah. I think both where you and I concur enormously, that we both are curious to understand that why people conform to certain belief system. But it's not conforming, but how conforming to a belief system uncritically, not thinking, creates that conflict that become catastrophic, claiming millions of lives. We have seen it. We have seen it over and over again. And we are dangerously edging towards the precipice as the war wages between Ukraine and Russia. Like, a lot of us don't really appreciate that we are literally toying with the possibility of third world war, because you have Ukraine, you have Russia, and you have Ukraine supporting these global superpowers with nuclear weapon, So, and did you see the movie um, about the Oppenheimer?
I started watching it and then I didn't. I just couldn't watch it. It was one I couldn't watch.
Okay, so long story short,
He was a troubled man because of what he made.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But there's one particular scene where one of Oppenheimer's mentor tells him that, do you think that the humans can handle the power that you're handling them, giving them? I genuinely think that technology has the potential to do a lot of good, but humans have not evolved in its social structure, in its emotional and psychological and spiritual being, to be able to deal with this godlike power.
That's right.
You know, the late Harvard biologist said that we humans are so in a difficult position that we have a Stone Age brain with medieval institutions like democracy that can be rigged so easily, with godlike technology. What do you do?
Exactly. And that would be good for another discussion
Hmm.
for us.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
keep
So
that in mind.
yeah, so I'm gonna take it down that
I'm
we're
looking at my clock too, and there's so
okay.
and I'm sure
Okay.
you.
All right, Ted. So in the next session, we'll discuss about O. Wilson's observation that what we do, we humans, like who have Stone Age brain, medieval institution, but godlike technological power on the basis of science. Yeah, I drag you to my research anyway. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Okay.
Ted.
Take care.